Honourable Senators, with us we have the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. We will first of all welcome Cabinet Secretary. It's very nice to see you again here. We will go straight to the questions because of time. Question number 57, Senator Professor Tom Ojenda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I shall ask question number 057, addressed to the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, Madam Soipan Tuya. The question is in four parts. Part one, could the Cabinet Secretary elaborate on the climate change initiatives put in place both nationally and in each county, considering the diverse topography and unique environmental and climate change needs of each county? B, what expertise was engaged and what criteria was applied in developing the national climate change initiatives and tailoring them to the specific needs of each county? Thirdly, could the Cabinet Secretary explain the measures put in place to enhance the capacity of each county government to implement the climate change initiatives in their respective counties, including the technical expertise of county governments to address environmental and climate change concerns, as well as the allocation of budgetary resources to each county within the designated timelines for the initiatives? And lastly, Mr. Speaker, sir, could the Cabinet Secretary provide progress reports on the implementation of the climate change initiatives in each county? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cabinet Secretary, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this invitation and for the questions raised by the Honourable Senator for Kisumu County. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, on matters climate change, environment, there is a very intricate link between the functions of the national government and those of county governments, and the role of the Senate becomes very crucial in terms of oversighting the implementation of climate action. Mr. Speaker, in terms of background, climate change remains a major threat to our nation's economic, social, and environmental well-being. And the major challenge remains to be how we will overcome the current low levels of climate resilience and the adaptive capacity that continue to threaten the ability of our local communities and key sectors of the economy to withstand the climate shocks that we find ourselves in. The ministry is the government lead on all issues climate change and has, through the Climate Change Act of 2016, established the requisite governance structures to guide climate change action in the country. And I will be expounding on this a little later. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is signatory to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, and the Paris Agreement. And we have been very keen to adhere to this important multilateral process by tapping into the available opportunities for us to be able to influence the global climate change discourse through active engagement in various global fora that arise from this international obligation. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Kwanza administration has been very intentional in profiling the country's climate action. And it is because the vagaries of the climate change debacle are borderless. And what Kenya does or does not do affects the global community and vice versa. And that's the reason why we have been very deliberate in our climate diplomacy. As a result of which, Mr. Speaker, Kenya is currently the chair of the African Group of Negotiators which gives the country an opportunity to shape the discussions on climate change in the continent, and thereafter influencing the same discourse at the global level through the conferences of parties, which happen every year. His Excellency the President is also the coordinator of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, as well as after the hosting of the inaugural Africa Climate Summit last year in September, Kenya is currently the host of the Africa Climate Change Secretariat. And as I say, this really is intended to enhance our resource mobilization capacities, linking the country with the technologies across the globe, as well as the climate financing challenges that we face, that we require the global networking. Mr. Speaker, coming to the specific question by Senator for Kisumu County, which is the focused on the initiatives we have put in both at national and county level on climate change needs, taking into account the climate change needs of every county. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the fact that the core mandate of the ministry is to provide policy and regulatory environment for adequate implementation of climate action in the country, the ministry has been engaged very vigorously in resource mobilization to address the climate change issues. I will focus on an example of a program called the Financing Locally Led Climate Action, FLOCA, which is a US $295 million program, which is focused on building climate change resilience at the local level. The program is targeting 45 counties, all the counties with the exclusion of Nairobi and Mombasa, and I'm going to explain the reason why. And this program is funded by the World Bank, the governments of Denmark, Germany, Sweden, and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Another program is the strengthening forest management for improved biodiversity conservation and climate resilience in the South Rangelands of Kenya, a project funded by the Global Environment Fund, and a list of others. I'm just highlighting the fact that in response to the Senator's question, we have been involved in fundraising efforts, and we have a list of projects that have come through. And Honorable Speaker, any fundraising that we do lands in counties to address the climate change challenges. The ministry, again, through the Development Partner Group, under the Office of the Deputy President, has been championing the alignment of all development partner projects and programs to the government manifesto, as well as ensuring the focus on tangible projects on the ground for us to realize maximum impact. Regarding climate change initiatives that we have put in place, we have a robust legislative and institutional architecture to address climate change and its impacts at both levels of government. Mr. Speaker, sir, at the national level, some of the climate change policies and laws are listed in my presentation, ranging from the Constitution, the Climate Change Response Strategy of 2010, the National Climate Change Action Plan, which is very, very important, Mr. Speaker, the National Climate Change Action Plan. We had one running between 2023 and 2027, 2018, 2022, and we recently came up with the 2023-2027 strategy. And this is as per the Climate Change Act. And this basically is an iterative planning tool for mainstreaming climate actions across all sectors of the economy at both levels of government. It is also an implementing tool for both the nationally determined contributions and, Mr. Speaker, the nationally determined contributions are our national commitments under the UNFCCC on our commitments to reduce emissions and enhance resilience building. We also have the National Adaptation Plan, which runs 2015 to 2030, and the Climate Change Act, which I have spoken to, Mr. Speaker. And just to delve a bit into the Climate Change Act, which is the parent act on climate matters in the country, it provides for and supports mainstreaming of climate change actions into development planning, decision-making, and implementation. Also sets out the principles for climate change planning and implementation. And I wish to highlight some recent amendments that we made to the Climate Change Act, which is last year. And this was intended to provide for regulation of carbon markets and to provide policy direction prescribing carbon reduction with the aim to reduce emissions as per our international and local obligations. Kenya has the largest carbon market portfolio in East Africa, but the truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, in terms of tangible impact to the citizens of Kenya, this has been very minimal, and the import of the amendments to the Climate Change Act were actually intended to ensure high-integrity carbon markets and a very clear mechanism of benefit sharing between the communities, project proponents, and governments, both national and county. In terms of the progress around the carbon markets space, last week, I think the week before, 18th of June, we have moved to designate the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, as the DNA, which is charged with the responsibility of authorizing and approving participation in the carbon projects under the Paris Agreement. And the reason I delve on this, Mr. Speaker, is because a proper implementation of the carbon markets framework in this country has far-reaching impacts on improvement of the livelihoods of the communities, as well as ensuring that we have sufficient coping mechanisms against climate action. We have listed also the National Climate Change Framework Policy of 2018, the Climate Change Finance Policy of 2018, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan 2019, as some of the legislative frameworks which set the stage for climate action in the country. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that the mandate of the ministry is on providing operational coordination on climate change, providing technical backstopping and requisite climate change policy and legal environment. And in this regard, therefore, the core mandate of the ministry is to offer coordination of various sectors. And we have some sectors identified under the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and those are the energy sector, agriculture sector, water, forestry, industry, transportation, all geared towards the mitigation effects or mitigation action against climate change. And our core mandate, therefore, is to do the coordination of all these entities. Mr. Speaker, we have made progress on enabling actions, and some of them I have already mentioned. Through the implementation of the 2 iterations of the National Climate Change Action Plan, there has been implementation of mitigation and adaptation initiatives across all sectors, some of which include the focus on increasing our tree cover. And this is with the recognition of the importance of prioritizing mitigation actions that have adaptation and sustainable development core benefits. Adoption of clean cooking, especially at the local level, to reduce over-reliance by our populations on biomass for domestic cooking and energy needs. And Mr. Speaker, I will be stating that the forestry sector is listed as the topmost cause of greenhouse gas emissions in the country, and thus the focus on restoration of our degraded landscapes, as well as focusing on alternatives to biomass energy to detract attention from the rudimentary focus on firewood for energy needs. And therefore, we are focusing on picking up on technologies across the globe that will give us sustainable options. Adoption of e-mobility, which is key in reducing emissions from burning of fossil fuels, and the government through the Ministry of Transport, is in the process of finalizing an e-mobility policy to this regard. And I'm glad I saw a motion passed by a member of this House calling for an increased focus on e-mobility options and non-motorized transportation in the country, which is the way to go. The other focus is the increased percentage of electricity generation mix to reduce emissions from the energy sector. Our mix currently stands at 92%, and with the multi-agency coordination through my ministry, the focus is to push this mix to 100% by 2030. Implementation of the National Climate Smart Agriculture is another core focus under the Ministry of Agriculture for purposes of adaptation. Mr. Speaker, I have mentioned the Climate Change Act and the provision for the carbon market regulatory framework, the National Climate Change Resource Center, which we have recently operationalized, and this is a model information and knowledge management center domiciled at our metrology department, and it is a national repository for climate change information and data, which is very, very much, it comes very handy at this time. The long-term low emissions development strategy, we prepared and launched it last year in 2023, which provides guidance to the country on attainment of low emission climate resilient development pathway in the long term. The ministry, through the support of development partners, including the Green Climate Fund, GCF, FLOCA, among others, facilitated the establishment and capacity building of climate change units across the counties and state departments in the country in line with the Climate Change Act of 2016. The ministry has also established climate change environment governance structures at the county level. These are county climate change committees under the respective county climate change acts and county environmental committees under the Environmental Management and Coordination Act. To sum up my response to the first question, Mr. Speaker, we have a law that came into effect in 2016, but little had gone into actualization or implementation, and that has been the focus of the ministry in the past few months. Going to the second question, which focuses on what expertise we have engaged, as well as what criteria we have applied in developing the national climate change initiatives and tailoring them to the specific needs of each county. Mr. Speaker, we are mandated to coordinate environmental and climate actions within the country, and having developed several national climate change initiatives, including policies, plans, and programs as required by law, we have also come up with an elaborate and inclusive process for the drafting and validation of national initiatives. And I'll state again, Mr. Speaker, that for the ministry and other key agencies at the national level and the county governments, we are linked at the hip when it comes to climate action implementation, and therefore the focus, as the question has been tailored, has been to make sure that all the initiatives, the national climate change action plans, the strategies are very inclusive at their development stage. And allow me, Mr. Speaker, to just give us a snapshot of the process that we undertook with the development of the National Climate Change Action Plan of 2023 to 2027, again to demonstrate the expertise we engaged and the criteria applied to ensure that these policies and strategies are tailored to meet the specific needs of counties. At the development of the National Climate Change Action Plan, we started off with a nomination process of a multidisciplinary and multi-institutional team, which was used. This multidisciplinary and multi-institutional approach was used to enable adequate scope and depth of input across all sectors. We undertook mapping of the technical skills and experiences required to identify experts from line ministries, departments and agencies, counties, private sector and civil society, and marginalized groups. Mr. Speaker, we work very closely with the Council of Governors in this regard. The development of the TORs for the steering committee to develop on terms of technical working groups to collect, analyze and synthesize relevant data and information, and lead consultants to lead the various thematic teams and develop the action plan. We embarked on nomination of a steering committee, members and technical experts from the technical working groups by ministries, departments, Council of Governors, private sector, and all those players. Several working sessions of each technical working group were held to come up with a zero draft of the plan. We engaged in a very robust stakeholder engagement at various levels, at the county technical teams, national experts, special interest groups, a public validation process where the technical working group incorporated stakeholder input. And all these processes, Mr. Speaker, led to the successful launch of the National Climate Change Action Plan 2023-27 during the Africa Climate Summit last year. That just gives a snapshot of the critical need for the ministry to work with a cross-sector of stakeholders as we develop our plans. Question number 57, Mr. Speaker, focuses on for me to explain the measures put in place to enhance the capacity of each county government to implement the climate change initiatives in their respective counties, including technical expertise of the county governments to address environmental and climate change concerns, as well as the allocation of budgetary resources to each county within the designated timelines for these initiatives. Regarding the measures put in place to enhance capacity, Mr. Speaker, noting the capacity building is a continuous and progressive process, we have carried out capacity building of county executive committee members, county officers, directors, and county climate change units in all the 47 counties on various climate-relevant issues. And this we have done through our climate change directorate within the ministry. We have also provided technical backstopping to counties on the development of county climate change acts, Mr. Speaker, and I am proud to say that at this point, all the counties are compliant in terms of coming up with their climate change acts. And what the ministry did was to develop a prototype that was then used by each county to come up with their climate change legislation. Development of county climate change action plans then followed, climate change policies, and participatory climate risk assessments. And at the same time, NEMA undertook development of county and environment action plans, mainstreamed into county integrated development plans. Mr. Speaker, you know that CIDPs are the core of the county development plans, and with these county environment action plans, which were deliberately weaved around the CIDPs, then we are in step or speaking in the same tone with the counties. Mr. Speaker, we have also provided an innovative programmatic support to counties. The Ministry, in collaboration with the National Treasury and the COG, developed the Financing Locally Led Climate Action Program to provide mechanisms to finance community climate action initiatives for enhanced climate resilience. The program, as I have said, is funded through the World Bank and a conglomeration of other partners. And the design is a unique Kenyan innovation designed to showcase how global climate finance flows can be efficiently and effectively channeled to address grassroots climate response needs. Mr. Speaker, I know it's of interest to the senators to have some bit of detail on the FLOCA program. Under the FLOCA program's County Climate Resilience Investment Grant, in 2023-24 financial year, counties received a total of 10,507,827 Kenya shillings from the FLOCA donors. Out of this, 7.3 billion was from the FLOCA donors, and Kenya shillings 3.1 billion was from the counties fund, the development fund of counties.
Cabinet Secretary, sorry to interrupt. If you could please summarize the remaining answers, because of time. We don't want to keep here for too long.
Yes.
And we already have the response. Instead of going word for word, just summarize, so that because there are a lot of supplementary questions.
Well guided, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy if the senators have copies of my statement here, Mr. Speaker, because this is one program that is very important for purposes of collaboration between the Senate and the national government through my ministry to ensure that we attain maximum impact of the intended objective of this program, which is to fund climate action at the local level. Mr. Speaker, I have an annexure there which outlines how much money has gone to each county. And this is a very unique program which is based on results. And one of the conditions for the counties was that they had to put in 1.5% of their development budget to match that from the development partners. And Nairobi and Mombasa counties are excluded from this program for reasons that these two counties are big-time beneficiaries of other government of other World Bank supported programs. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the question, and as I conclude on this part of the FLOCA funding, the request to senators is to engage in the oversight role, as they do best, to ensure the funds are utilized prudently for the benefit of vulnerable communities. And the uniqueness of this program is that it is designed to run from the ward level. Question number 57, part D. The question focuses on progress reports on the implementation of the climate change initiatives in each county. Mr. Speaker, the Climate Change Act in sections 15 and 19 outlines duties of public entities and county governments with regards to climate action, and part of which is counties are required to integrate and mainstream climate change actions in their CIDPs. They are supposed to enact legislations. They are also required to report through county assemblies on progress of implementation of climate actions. They are to designate a county executive committee member to coordinate climate change affairs, as well as establish climate change units that is well staffed and resourced. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, until 2022, only 5 counties of Wajir, Mandera, Isiolo, Makueni, and Kitui had complied to the requirements of the Act. But through collaboration with the National Treasury, the Council of Governors, we have now supported all the counties, and I'm happy to say that we have full compliance. This is also true of the national level MDAs, where we have climate change units established across the board as per requirement of the law. Regarding progress reports on implementation of climate initiatives in each county, the counties are making significant progress in this regard, notwithstanding the many challenges. On policy and legislative measures, we have 45 counties that have already developed specific laws, like I had stated. We have 45 counties set up, which have set up county climate change funds and have put in 1.5% of their development budget in this regard. We have mainstreaming of climate change into CIDPs by 45 counties, Mr. Speaker, and the rest is outlined in the statement. On institutional measures, we have climate change units in every county as we speak. And Mr. Speaker, these are initiatives that have happened in the last slightly under 2 years because our focus has been operationalizing the law in this regard. Mr. Speaker, in financial year 23-24, we have seen significant prioritization of climate action at the county level in terms of resource allocation, which is very encouraging. And in conclusion, on the questions raised by Senator for Kisumu County, although much is already happening with the climate change crisis being manifested ever so harshly across the globe, with the cyclic events of drought, flooding, and this pendulum effect which is happening across the country, it is crucial that Parliament does prioritize adequate allocation of resources to both levels of government to address climate change issues, in order for us to build the necessary adaptive capacity for our communities. And this calls for aggressive resource mobilization, which I undertake for my ministry. And again, as I said, any funding that we mobilize at the national level lands in a county. Mr. Speaker, I beg to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Senator, you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the questions that I asked was specifically intended to get the ministry to highlight contributions that come from the FLOCA Fund specifically. I note, Mr. Speaker, sir, that my county, Kisumu County, got a total of 273,335,666, and that is commendable, because if we lose oversight on these funds, either through the PSC or through CIPIC, then these funds will go into waste. We'll never know where they end up. Mr. Speaker, one supplementary question. Could the Cabinet Secretary just tell us if there are any funds, if counties have earned any funds from carbon financing? If there's any supplementary list that CS as in Senate today, we could have it. If the CS could also perhaps even give this list at a later time so that we know, Mr. Speaker, how to oversight our counties. Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the supplementary question from the Senator for Kisumu County. Mr. Speaker, I highlighted that Kenya is touted as the highest trader in carbon credits in the region. Most of these transactions have been voluntary carbon trading transactions between private project proponents and communities at various levels and at different sectors. And there is a separation between these voluntary carbon projects, which are at a private level, and then we have the regulated carbon trading programs, which have not been in the radar of government. And that is the reason why we have focused very keenly on reviewing the law and putting in place a carbon market framework, Mr. Speaker. And one of the core components of this framework is a national registry that will process each and every single carbon market project in the country from different sectors. So we have one national registry, which is already underway in terms of operationalization after the gazettement of the designated national authority. And this national registry will be fed by sector-specific registries from energy, agriculture, and so many other sectors. The assurance I want to give this House and Kenyans in general, Mr. Speaker, we engage in a very rigorous public participation process, again to ensure that this space, which is shrouded with a lot of mystery, will now come to the fore with the full implementation of the law. And I wish to invite this House, members of this House, to pay keen attention to the legislation as it is, Mr. Speaker, because we are going to have, we already have a lot of interest expressed at different levels, even including a G2G arrangements around carbon trading plans. But there are so many other small projects going on in the country, and we are ready as a ministry now to net all these, put them under the national registry, then we can spotlight and ensure clear benefit sharing and transparency in terms of how these funds from the carbon markets are going to turn around the lives of Kenyans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. I hope, Senator, you're satisfied with that answer.
I am super satisfied.
Thank you. We will take other supplementary questions. I will start with Senator Esther Okinyuri. I hope your question is relevant to the main question that was asked by the Senator of Kisumu. And please go straight to your question, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm one of those who doesn't need to be reminded on being relevant to the primary question. So I would want to find out from the Cabinet Secretary the progress of the 15 billion tree planting exercise and the status of public forest cover in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for being very brief. We'll take another question from this side. Senator Okongo, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the CS for finding time to appear before the Senate to make clarification on some of the issues. Now, I want to raise a supplementary question on the usage of FLOCA money, the money that is used to financing locally led climate action. Waziri, you have mentioned to us that the government, through your ministry, has put in place governance structures to ensure that this money is utilized and used for the intended purposes. I interpret that to mean that you will assist the Senate to ensure that that money does not find its way to the pockets of those tasked with implementation. And I want to disclose that my county of Nyamira is one of the recipients of this money, and we received 55 million shillings. Now, Waziri, I want to raise a question that touches on governance, accountability, proper utilization of the FLOCA money. We had a project that was initiated called Raitigo Water Supply during the financial year 2015-2016. The county budgeted 17,301,915. The project was done. The money was paid to the contractor. I have details of the contractor who did the work. Auditor General raised issues on that project having been used to siphon money from the county. There being no value for money because the project was not completed and launched for the benefit of the people who reside in the Raitigo area. Now, in response to that audit query, the governor responded that he wants to use money from Climate Change Resilience Investment Fund to complete the project. Madam CS, how do you ensure that the money we are sending to counties is not used as a way of, as an avenue for governors stealing money that is meant for a very good purpose on climate change? Because I don't understand, Madam CS, how money that has been set aside for a project through county funds paid out to a contractor. Again, how do you use donor funds to repeat the same project? Can you address us on how you are following up on governance, the proper usage and utilization of money? And if you can also take the example I've given you for Nyamira. If you want the response to the governor, I have it. I can table it before the floor. That can assist you so that we ensure that this money does not go to the pockets of a few individuals. Somebody was saying that some governors set aside a percentage. If you send 55, for example, to Nyamira, some say that 20 million should go to their pockets and then 35 can do something. And we really want this money to be used for the benefit of the people of the counties where we reside. Thank you,
Senator. Cabinet Secretary, maybe you can respond to those two questions, then we'll take the other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will start by responding to Senator Essie on the status of our 15 billion program, as well as the forest cover of the country. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we have a constitutional mandate to ensure at least a 10% tree cover, not forest cover, tree cover for the country. And I'm happy to report that the baseline that we have as we implement the 15 billion is 12.3%. And as I said, and this is from the latest assessment of our forest cover and tree cover done in 2021. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned that the forestry sector is the highest emitter for the country. And if we are to deal with the climate change crisis, including the flooding, the cyclic droughts, I want to say and really persuade for all of us to be on the same page that this program of reforestation is very, very critical in terms of emissions reduction, but also dealing with the mitigation aspects of climate action. Mr. Speaker, the progress of the 15 billion tree growing program is very good, as I must say, Mr. Speaker. We have a very high and encouraging reception from Kenyans across the board towards this initiative. We have, as we stand, Mr. Speaker, the national government through the executive has taken a frontline approach to do adoption of sites for restoration across the country. And this is just intended to give this the necessary push for each one of us to join in, from individual Kenyans to the private sector, the county governments, to join efforts in this initiative to make sure that we enhance our tree cover from the current 12.23% to 30% in 2032. As a requirement of the law, Mr. Speaker, we are required to do periodic assessments after every 2 years of forest cover, and I can assure the country that going by the actions and the receptiveness of this program across the board, we are going to see very, very significant enhancement of our forest cover across the country. The last thing I will mention is that we are encouraging Kenyans to focus. If, Mr. Speaker, we had been focusing on very well-structured tree-growing programs in the country, we would be very far in terms of our forest cover. But what we have been doing over the years is planting trees and not paying much attention to the nurturing and protection of these trees to maturity. And that is why we have been deliberate in telling Kenyans we are engaging in tree growing, not tree planting. If tree planting really counted, then we would not be planting trees anymore in this country. So even when there is no rain, the focus should be on how to protect the seedlings that we have been planting over the years. Mr. Speaker, moving to the question by the Honourable Omogeni on the usage of LOCA funding, once again is just to really load the questions put forward by the Senator for Kisumu about LOCA. It is a very, very critical fund, Mr. Speaker, and our intention as a ministry, and even in our discussions with the development partners, this is a model. It has not been tried anywhere before. Kenya is the first one to model this very devolved level climate action plan that is supposed to impact on lives from the very grassroots level. And we have had legislators and even executive members from other jurisdictions coming to benchmark with the FLOCA. So I would really want to urge this House, please let us guard the FLOCA funding against our hearts, because the development partners are willing and ready to scale up, but only if we record success. And going to the question raised by Senator Omogeni, in terms of the governance structure, and again, it is a very easy to monitor program. It is fashioned against Program for Performance, designed by the World Bank team, which there are clear steps and conditions that counties must meet in order to get the next level of funding. It is in my interest, and I'm sure for the senators, that all our counties succeed in this. One of the requirements of the P4R system is that counties must come up with special purpose accounts. Actually, if they don't come up with special purpose accounts, it becomes an audit query, and they cannot be eligible for more funding. So those are things that we need to look out as senators. That is what you need to look out in your oversight role. We have climate change planning committees at the county level, and we have ward climate change committees, again at the ward level. And at the ministerial level, my ministry is one of the implementing agencies, and together with the Council of Governors and the National Treasury, we are part of the project implementation unit, and it has clear guidelines on the parameters that the counties have to meet in order to get further support. In terms of the questions raised by the Auditor General on the Raitiko Water plant or project, I don't have the facts of the particular case, but it is, again, my plea that we spotlight the FLOCA program to make sure that it is working and that the money will not be misused, because it will prevent us from getting more support from the development partners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Maybe I would direct Senator Eric Omogeni to table the query by the Auditor General so that it can be furnished to the ministry and they will be able to look into it.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, I then wish to table a letter dated the 15th of May, 2024, signed by His Excellency Governor Amos Kimomi Nyaribo, and I'll direct the CS to look at page 34 of that document, the project Raitigo Water Supply, initiated 2015-2016. The second column will show you the money that was budgeted and paid, 17,301,915. The fourth column as a response from the governor, where he says that he's going to use money from Climate Change Resilience Investment Program grant funds to complete that project. So it will be double budgeted at the county level, money set aside, money paid to a contractor, and again, he's saying in 2024-2025, he's going to take money from the donor funds to put it in the same project. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I table the document.
Thank you, Senator. We'll take the next two questions from Senator George Mbugua and Senator Alexander Mundingi. Give him the mic, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under the Forest Conservation and Management Act, community forest associations are granted permission to participate in forest conservation, including harvesting and grazing. Mr. Speaker, recently the ministry made a pronouncement that they are banning grazing of animals in the forest, and it was not clear whether it is all forest. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell the country, through this House, what is the correct position so that we can know what is happening in our counties? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Mundingi.
Asante Bwana Spika. Asante kwa waziri na ile kazi unafanya kubadilisha katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Swali langu Bwana waziri, vijana wengi wa Embu County watapanda miti ama walianza kupanda miti, na wakiendelea kupanda miti kabisa, watafaidika namna gani na mambo ya carbon credit? Kwa sababu wakati ile mwingine walipanda miti, na wakati mulikuwa nua miti, Embu County tuko na wodi 20 kule Masinani, na tuko na sub county 4 katika Embu County, kilio yao miti haikununuliwa. Kwa hiyo sasa, Madam Speaker, watu watafaidika namna gani vijana wetu ndio waweze kujisaidia kwa maisha wakitafuta kazi ile nyingine inafaa? Pia hata tunajua hata hii inafaa. Ya pili, ni asante kwa sababu Embu County ilipatiwa milioni 90. Maramishi nyingi ambaye mimi nilisikia governor akisema ni kuwa pesa nyingi ni sawa, inaonekana kama mingi, lakini sinda ni kuwa nyingi zimewekwa mambo ya kufunza watu mambo mingi. Kwa hiyo tunaona Bwana waziri, ni heri mambo ya mafunzo ingekuwa pesa kidogo na hiyo ingine iweze kuenda kupanda miti. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Asante sana, Senator. Cabinet Secretary, maybe you can respond to those two questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to sum up the question by Senator Omogeni, please focus on the special purpose accounts of the FLOCA, and to make sure we have a thread of how the money is being used, then you can do proper oversight. And I will definitely look at the letter that you have cited and tabled before the House. From Senator Mbugua on the Forest Conservation and Management Act, Mr. Speaker, we have within the law participatory forest management processes. I want to say that without the support and partnership of communities, we cannot succeed with our tree planting, we cannot succeed with our forest management. And the intended purpose for participatory forest management procedures is to have communities at the core, the forest adjacent communities at the core of forest management. On the issue of grazing, we have, under the Forest Management Act, we have the formation of community forest associations. These are legal entities, Mr. Speaker. Under the community forest association, there is laid out a framework of collaboration between the forest associations with the Kenya Forest Service officers to actualize the participatory forest management plans, in the sense that we have certain user rights within the forest. Grazing is one of them, but they are practiced within certain parameters and certain regulations. For example, Mr. Speaker, we cannot say that we can have freelance grazing in our forests, because then what happens to the restoration efforts that we are engaging in? We plant trees, and then cows and goats come in and eat up the seedlings. We'll be doing a zero-sum game. The effect of the participatory forest management plans is to make sure that we have zoning of our protected areas. We have designated spaces where grazing can happen. We have areas where grazing cannot happen. That requires regulation. That requires cooperation and close collaboration between the communities and the Kenya Forest Service through forest management agreements. Mr. Speaker, the statement that the Senator says that we made as a ministry, I am just coming back to tell the country that we have user rights within our forests, but they are matched with responsibilities of conservation. And for my statement was very clear. I did a written statement and circulated across the country. And basically what I'm saying is that we have a law. We have a way of engaging between the Kenya Forest Service and the communities. We just need to enforce that in a very collaborative fashion. The problem, and I'm not afraid to say, is that there has not been enforcement. It has been a free-for-all. So when we come in to call for enforcement, there is a bit of discomfort. But rest assured, Honourable Senator and the entire House, that we are not phasing out user rights. We are just saying they have to be measured against the responsibilities for conservation. And the law is very clear about that. And I want to promise that public participation is what we are going to carry out across the country, so that we don't have misconstruction of what the ministry is doing around this. Communities are our key partners. Mr. Speaker, coming to the Embu Senator, the issue of carbon credit, I have spelled it out. I would wish the Senator to look at the law as it is right now, how we are designing. Actually, the community benefit sharing framework within our new carbon markets law is very clear in terms of what the communities should get against various classifications of projects. Some of them are land-based, non-land-based, community lands and private lands. Mr. Speaker, I take cognizance of the issue raised by the Senator to the effect that young people are planting trees. Some of them have come up to develop nurseries across the country because of our 15 billion tree strategy. Mr. Speaker, we had a very good plan to set up a green army across the country, which was really going to focus on these young people, where we would source the seedlings from them for the tree planting initiatives, but also use them in the protection and maintenance of the seedlings. But because of the fiscal situation we find ourselves in, we are yet to implement that. But with the current tree planting activities happening at the executive level, where CSs are allocated various ecosystems across the country, we are very clear that we mobilize around the local communities in whatever site a CS is allocated to, in terms of sourcing of seedlings from our young people and young women, but also engaging them in the contractual activities that come with it. Finally, Senator Ovembu has also raised a very pertinent issue with regard to our development partner funding. Mr. Speaker, the sad truth is that we have billions of monies that come from our development partners, but most of it goes to intangibles. Training after training, seminars, but as I said, really to attract attention of the senators to the FLOCA funding. We are very keen, and I have been making trips across the country, meeting governors, just encouraging that we come up with visible models, tangible models of what the FLOCA program is doing. Only then shall we succeed. If we are saying we are doing a water project, then we see an end-to-end plan on how FLOCA started this and finished. That's the only thing that will convince our development partners to scale up these programs. We are also encouraging our governors, because of our need to restore our ecosystems. We are encouraging them not to spread too thin. For this initial rollout of FLOCA, just focus on 1 or 2 ecosystems. If it's a water project, yes, pick a wetland, fence that wetland, plant trees around that wetland, and let us see water flowing out of the FLOCA money, because it is a lot of money if well utilized. So, Mr. Speaker, once again, as an implementing ministry, we are keen to make sure that these development funds go towards tangible, visible projects. And the monitoring aspect of FLOCA, Mr. Speaker, is one I've been very invested in, and with the support of this House, then we can make sure that we will have replicable models that will help us in our environmental conservation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. We shall proceed to the next question. I see that James Murango is not here, so I will direct that question is dropped. And Honourable Senators, it's very unfortunate that as Senators we put a question in place. The CS prepares the response, sends a written response, attends the Senate to respond to that question, and then the Senator is not present. It's very unfortunate, and I apologize to the Cabinet Secretary for that, but I have to drop this question. And we also have the provision on our standing orders that you can nominate somebody to ask on behalf of you if you're not available. So, Cabinet Secretary, my apologies for that, but I do thank you for your thorough answers to the questions that were asked today. And I would want to also encourage you not to lose heart on this one case where the Senator was not here to ask the question. But we need this kind of interactions, because the issues that are raised here by the Senators are issues brought to us by the public. And they find this opportunity for them to get the answers that to get the answers that they've asked. So, Cabinet Secretary, mine is to say thank you very much for attending, and to wish you all the best in your duties and the work that you have at the Ministry. Thank you very much, and we will give you leave.